much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to, and I forgot to put my glass on, Inside the Numbers. That's why, see, it looks like I got beat up. With the People's Pundit, I'm your host, Rich Barris, People's Pundit. If you're watching on YouTube, we definitely appreciate you doing that, and you can go ahead and like the videos and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. That'll let you know when we go live. But the best way, of course, we would very much like you to move over to Rumble. Sign up on Rumble. Give us the little plus signs. And if you are watching on Rumble, right up there to my right there, pointing right at it. See the local sign? That's how you subscribe to peoplespundit.locals.com. peoplespundit.locals.com. All right. And by the way, when you do, you'll get access to the things I'm about to show you today. You get it all early. And you help us design the surveys. And there's just other information that you get when you do. Today, we'll have the great Viva Frei on. He's been doing a very good job and for weeks now, covering what led up to the protests themselves, and of course, you know, what is going on, the blowback to it. And we're going to ask him about that. Before I get into some of these other numbers, okay, I'd like to point out something. And it's not really a matter of opinion, okay? And it looks like I got rid of my old Britannia version. My old Britannia. They changed definitions today in a way I don't think any prior generation had to deal with. And what do I mean by that? So one day you could look at the definition of a certain therapeutic, whatever it may be. You know, I'm just spitballing here. And it says what it has said for, ever, for decades. And then the next day you may look and it's something different because it's following a narrative. Same goes for political science, not just other sciences. The same goes for political science, where one day you'll look up the definition of, let's say, fascism. And then the next day it's totally different. Let me explain. I don't know how we ignore the fact. I want to explain what fascism really is. And I don't know, and then how to recognize it. Because I don't know how we ignore the fact that there were these obviously radical left-wing funded groups that were basically burning cities down for 4 years, screaming about fascist Donald Trump, when in fact anyone who is for limited government or limiting government is the antithesis of a fascist. Because there is a fake racial component, and by fake, I mean fake. I don't know if I'm going to break your brain with this, but Donald Trump never said all Mexicans were rapists. That is a lie. Donald Trump never praised white supremacists at Charlottesville. That is one of the most egregious lies that has ever been told to the American people because it's a dangerous lie. It is dangerous to gin up racial strife and hatred for your own political gain, especially when it is not true. If you would take 30 seconds, if you still believe it is, if you would take 30 seconds to read the transcript, you would see that you have been lied to. But unfortunately, too many people are too lazy and too intellectually weak to do so. And that's typically how things like real fascism are able to be born in a society. And what we're seeing right now, you tell me whether or not it reflects the real definition of fascism. And fascism is only considered in the modern context to be right-wing because of what happened in the post-World War II era, even during World War II. We had no choice but to make friends with Joseph Stalin, a left-wing communist. Communists and fascists typically hate each other, even though they are brothers in socialism, a left-wing ideology. They hated each other not because they were diametrically opposed, but because each of them believed that they had the better form of socialism. Because we made allies with Joseph Stalin and actually called him Uncle Joe, a mass murderer, we had to separate him and Hitler in the national discourse. So we literally changed the definition of what fascism means, and we gave it an explicitly racial connotation when it has nothing to do with race itself. Nazism is a form of fascism that adds a racial component. But in truth, fascism has nothing to do with race. It is a political and economic system. It's one where the government allows private businesses and corporations to basically have figureheads. They have the outward appearance that they are private enterprise, but they are not. Government still dictates to private enterprise what it is that it can do or should do. And this is all used for the state to coerce the population. Economically, it's used to allocate capital and labor and other resources. But in the political sphere, it's used to exert power. Like Hitler used it. Private industry, I mean, they had a choice. They could reappropriate their manufacturing sectors to what he wanted them to do. Maybe they made cars. Maybe they made some sort of ironwork product, whatever it may be. But the state needed them to do something else, so they did it. If they refused, they would be accused of being bad citizens and executed or destroyed by some other means necessary. If the banking industry did not cooperate and allow itself to be used by the government to coerce behavior from citizens, then they would be labeled bad citizens. They would be executed or destroyed. Whereas Joseph Stalin believed, and other communists and Marxists believed, that that was all kind of nonsense and that there are too many people, there are too many chiefs, and there are too many chiefs and not enough Indians. So isn't it better if we just, sell the public on this notion that they own these industries? It sounds a lot better. Of course, you own nothing. The bureaucracy owns and controls it. Calling something publicly owned AOC doesn't actually mean the citizens own it. And in fact, that has never been how it turned out with these governments. In truth, vast politburos and other bureaucracies were created and populated by the ruling regime, and they use them to their ends, their own ends, not the ends of the people or what was best in the best interest of the people, to their own ends. So while they're brothers in socialism, the difference is really ownership over the private sector. But they are nevertheless left-wing ideologies. That is true. End of story. You cannot argue with it because you are wrong. There is nothing right-wing at all about Nazism. There's nothing right-wing at all about any other form of fascism. Yet we had these selfish, privileged, spoiled little white suburban brats running around with masks on and their stupid little flags decrying fascism any chance they could get against Donald Trump when he was president. Meanwhile, a government like Justin Trudeau's is actually a fascist government. What he is doing to put down protests in the name of saving democracy is fascist. Directing the financial sector to target and destroy private citizens that dissent from the government is fascism. It is the definition of fascism. Where are they now? The biggest insult is that it's being done in the name of democracy, which, by the way, that's why the United States wasn't a democracy. It isn't and never was. Even with the 16th and 17th Amendment, it is still something of a hybrid between democracy and a republic, which the latter of which is what it was founded as. Democracy cannibalizes itself. The majority the tyranny of the majority runs over the minority. It leads to internal strife and civil war. That's why it's a failed system of government. And the founders looked no further than Periclean democracy to determine that's what it would be. But it works for these new age, these new left-wing tyrants, because they can claim it's in the interest of democracy. Nobody knows the difference. And act as the fascist tyrants that they really are. Cancel culture is a social form of fascism. You are using a social order to coerce, and if they refuse to be coerced, to destroy fellow citizens for having dissenting point of views. Fascism's really no different, other than it is backed by police state power. So here we have nobody. This is the problem with, again, this is the problem with being ignorant to these basic historical truths, these basic definitions of what is fascism, what is communism, is the United States a democracy? What do you mean it's a republic? The minute we lost sight of that, that's when it was open season. And why am I saying we? Because Justin Trudeau learned this from us. Weeks, if not months ago. And when this first started, actually. I told you. Trudeau is gearing up to impose the January 6th model on people who dissent from his government. He learned it from the United States. In fact, not only are they doing it to their own citizens, they're actually using those relationships that they have because, of course, interdependence. It's very simple for Trudeau to pick up the phone, call his friends here, and get financial institutions that have been doing business with someone like Mike Lindell for years to remove his accounts because he is actually helping people who are dissenting from the government of Trudeau. Isn't democracy supposed to be about dissent? Isn't in any self-governing society the highest act of patriotism to question your government? To question the decisions your government is making? State-run media completely abdicated their duty. I mean, they're not even, no, they didn't, because they're state-run. I'm saying media, Western media has completely abdicated their duty, and now they are to be adversarial, and now they are state-run media. They're actually doing things like chasing down, instead of going after people who got lists of donors from Go Send Go to support the truckers, instead of chasing them down for doxing these private citizens. No. They want access to that data so they can go then take it to financial institutions so they can have their accounts closed. They are acting like Joseph Goebbels. That's it. That's their role. And they are fascists too. So here we are. I wanted to talk about polling before Viva comes on, but I have to bring this up because I really don't know how we ignore the fact that we heard the word fascist over and over again incessantly for 4 years. There wasn't a fascist bone in Donald Trump's body. No conservative, no politician or leader or citizen who advocates for limited government could ever be construed as a fascist. Why? Because fascism is a left-wing statist ideology. It has nothing to do with limited government. It has nothing to do with individualism. Quite exactly the opposite. Now, there have been Republicans who are borderline fascists. George W. Bush, borderline fascist. He acted like a borderline fascist. When the financial crisis happened, everybody, Hank Paulson, God damn, I fought against socialism my entire career. And now I am forced to open the door to it in America. Well, calm down, Henry. Because you really didn't open the door to socialism. You opened the door to fascism. is the difference. So, I don't know if that helps you sleep better at night, but that's the case. We are talking, and that's exactly right, ES13. The two ideologies, conservatism or any limited government ideology, and fascism or any other left-wing ideology, because fascism is a left-wing ideology. It is socialism. No matter how many times these fake-ass fact-checkers come out with their twisted-ass logic, there is no way to dispute the fact that fascism is a left-wing ideology. And the two of them, ES13 is 100% correct, are diametrically opposed to each other. Even if Donald Trump had said something, oh, Mexicans are racist and we need to deport them all, which he did not. Which, by the way, Mexicans, I'm going to show you in a second, clearly don't believe he did. Well, most of. I'm sure there are people who do. But even if he did, it still wouldn't make him a fascist, because the racial component of Nazism was unique to their brand of fascism. There could be a racial component of any ideology. Marxism repeatedly had racial components. Nobody talks about what Stalin did to the Ukrainians, starving them in an ethnic cleansing. The New York Times was too busy talking about how females' toes curl in Russia, at least at that time. Is Marxism all that bad? I know there's all these people starving to death, but you know what? Women have toe-curling orgasms. That's the headline in the New York Times during the period of that starvation. I kid you not, ladies and gentlemen. I kid you not. Don't blame me for bringing something up like that. That's what they chose to cover instead of genocide. Mao Zedong, he obviously had racial animosity towards certain groups. Obviously. But we only talk about it with Hitler because he had to be the bad guy at that time. And of course, he was a bad guy. But Uncle Joe couldn't be a bad guy because we needed Uncle Joe. And frankly, because Joseph McCarthy was right. There were a lot of communists in our government. There were a lot of communists in the State Department. There were a lot of communists in Hollywood. He may have been wrong with some of his tactics. I'll leave that to you for you to debate. But he was right about the threat from within. That's not in dispute anymore. I have this list. Whatever. Still doesn't change the fact he was right. So there was this aversion to putting Marxism in the same basket with Hitler, even though they are both different forms of socialism. Their own unique brand of socialism. Between, quite frankly, what was a sympathy towards Marxism among the elites in the United States, and the fact that we needed Uncle Joe to begin with. This got revised. And frankly, everybody who talks about it is ignorant. Or, I mean, people who talk about it in the national discourse, in national newspapers, on cable news, on network news. Most of them are, in fact, just honestly ignorant. And then you have something a little bit more sinister, which is those same people who knew the truth back then are like the vanguard to the fact checkers now. And they obviously have made it their mission to perpetuate this lie. Nothing could be further from the truth. So now the problem is that many people don't recognize it when they see it. And in fact, they're so ignorant to it that they actually believe that fascism is somehow going to defend democracy. It's asinine. But if you understand the context, the history, and how we got into the vernacular of all of this, which I just explained over the last 20 minutes, then it really doesn't stretch the imagination to understand it. And hell, most of these spoiled, rich little white kids, they're just looking for something to be a part of. They're not thinkers or intellectuals. It's time for some painful truth. These are generally losers who failed in academia, or worse, will end up being part of academia, but some of them will. But generally, the same reason why some young radical leftists would join Antifa is for the same reason that some young new immigrant would join MS-13, or any young impressionable person would join a street gang. They're twisted up, empty, and looking to be part of something bigger, to give their life meaning. How many interviews have you seen conducted by members of a group like Antifa? Did they ever articulate to you, or a reporter that you saw on TV, they ever articulate in great detail their views and why they're there? When on the occasion that you don't get some babbling moron who just hates capitalism and wants to see the downfall to Western civilization, and you do get somebody who really truly believes they're anti-fascist, they speak nonsense. They speak nonsense, and you can't tell them any different. Fascism. Wait a minute. Whoa. You're talking about race here. You're not talking about political and economic systems. Race in and of itself has absolutely nothing to do with fascism. What are you talking about? Yes, it does. When you hate other people of different colors, you're a fascist. Okay, well, A, how do you know it's in someone's heart? The media told you these people are racist? That's how you know what's in their heart? You read it in the New York Times or something? Slate, right? See it on MSNBC or something? Number 2, that's incorrect. Wrong answer. Negative 2,000 on the board. Race has nothing to do with fascism. Nazism, not fascism. All right. What we are seeing, and by the way, here, I showed this to locals yesterday, because we're going to talk about some other polls when we're done with Viva. But did I get rid of that? And by the way, it's again, like, we're going to talk about this more with Viva, but it's like, oh, and he's almost here. He's almost ready. How could you possibly claim to be saving democracy if you do not have the will of the people on your side? It just makes no sense. It makes no sense. So real quick, before I bring on Viva, let me just show you what I meant when I said that Mexicans aren't buying it. So I don't know why they think, and by they I mean these spoiled, privileged little white kids who have no life and are like going to end up dropping out of college. I don't know why they think they need to be the champions of other people, because the other people don't really give a damn. They don't need them there. They don't want them there defending them. Real quick, and I'll go over this in a lot more detail, but bring your eyes to the bottom right there. Among Mexican men, Mexicans overall, it's not even men anymore, excuse me. That's just why this is so important. Among Hispanics, it's tied. And among Mexicans, Donald Trump actually has a little over a 2-point lead over Joe Biden. Or no, a little under, excuse me, right? Yeah. 45, 43, if you round, let's call it 2. So they don't seem to give a damn. When in 2020, these same people told us they voted 54.3% for Joe Biden and only 35.1% for Donald Trump. Right? Again, to save democracy. All right. You ready over there, buddy? Give me a thumbs up if you're ready. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and bring him on because I did my little rant, and he's been doing my next guest has been doing a great job covering everything from start to finish, and then also offering a lot of good commentary about some of the things we've heard as the government attempted to respond to this. And I'm going to bring him on now. I'm going to just shut up. All right, Viva, first of all, thanks for joining Inside the Numbers.
First My pleasure.
First time Inside the Numbers. I think so. You had me on Sidebar. That's it, right?
It feels like we've done this before. I just got to get the framing, make sure the lighting is okay. This side is too bright. Hold on. And what's this?
I got shines in my glasses.
Well, you're pulling a Casey Neistat. It's good. Richard,
yeah, actually, I accidentally let people see it. I clicked on before I put my glasses on, and you know what? It just looks like someone beat the crap out of me, but that's not what happened. All right, and even I go on Steve Gruber yesterday, and he's like, "Oh, stop it! Shut up! Someone punched you in the nose." It should have healed or it should soon. We'll see. But yeah, again, thanks for having me on. I mean, your show, and I'm glad you finally had a chance to come on ours, and definitely during this time because. I've seen a lot of other people say, "Oh, Rebel News did a good job." I went and I checked it out, but Laura and I have really been watching your stuff during this, and because you'll go up to you'll go up to the protesters, you'll go up to the counter protesters, and generally speaking, for those who don't know, Canada has been a lot more strict. I would say it's fair to say because we have different states that impose different rules, and I would say overall Canada's lingered with the COVID lockdown situation. A lot, would you say that's fair?
I would say that's an understatement of the decade. We had.
I'm trying to be nice. Go ahead.
We had a curfew in Quebec last year. A curfew that started at, I think at the time it was 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, carried through to the next morning, and it was supposed to be 1 month to flatten the curve, and it lasted 5 months. It lasted so long that the daylight savings had changed, and we were in curfew while the sun was still going down, which led to me calling the premier of the province, François Legault, the sunset thief. We had curfews in Quebec, lockdowns in Ontario. At one point in Ontario, they empowered the police officers to stop and ask anyone for ID why they were out of the house, for being in a park, for being outside of their homes during what was effectively nothing short of house arrest. And the police finally said, we're not doing that. Good for them. What have we had in Quebec? Vaccine passports, where you were required to show a QR code, full vaccination, 13 years and over, to participate in sports at school, to get into coffee shops, restaurants. They recently imposed it to get into big box retail stores, and just to name a few. And they're rescinding these COVID measures as we speak. But that's over the top, absolute lunacy in Quebec, and it was like people wanted more of it. People were like, oh, I don't need to go out at night, and anyone who does is being a selfish prick who wants Granny to die. I mean, it was over the top.
Yeah, and now I was looking at it's one of the polls I actually follow in Canada because they have their own panel, and it's kind of like apples to apples, right? So depending on whatever their overall final track records are and whatnot, it's still comparing apples to apples when you're looking at the same pollster who's tapping the same panel over and over. And for the first time, Angus Reid, by the end of January, had the majority. So this is what baffles me about Trudeau's comments and other people's, the counter protesters who came to Ottawa. Even urban Canadians are now opposed to these restrictions and say it's time for this to end. And yet Trudeau and the counter protesters keep talking as if they have the mandate of the Canadian people behind them. It's just not true anymore.
Here's the deal. I can recognize when I have some confirmation bias or where I may be unconvincible. When Léger, what's the other one, Axios, or whoever these pollsters come out and say 75% of Canadians support the measures and 50% support the fines or imprisoning the unvaccinated. I recognize I don't believe those polls. I think those polls are BS based on a sample field of 1,100 people who answer their phone at 4 p.m. I believe those polls are intended craft public opinion, not reflect it. And then I will acknowledge, I will be inclined to believe when these same pollsters put out a poll that runs counter to the government narrative. So when they say there's a poll that shows a lot of people don't support these measures, I'm more inclined to believe that, and I can appreciate what some might call a double standard or hypocrisy or confirmation bias. But there is a distinction between when pollsters that I consider to be corrupt and fundamentally dishonest run a poll that runs contrary to what I believe is their narrative. That's the explanation. With that said, there's a lot of people who still want these measures. There's a lot of people who I hear them on the radio. Sure, they select their calls, and sure they filter them and take the ones who are going to be amenable to what they want to promote by way of message. But there's people out there. Remove. This is the Richard. This is a revelation that I just had yesterday. These I will call them idiots for lack of a better word, not citizens, the media, come out and say the premier retracting the vaccine passport is totally unscientific. They're just responding to polls. It's an idiotic thing to do. Don't say to themselves, that very same idiotic government that you're faulting now for following polls and not science is the one who implemented the policy that you're relying on in the first place. So
in the first place,
that's where you have a logical inconsistency. They'll call the government idiots for doing what they don't want to do, but then they'll rely on that same government for the validity of the decision in the first place, when it was equally idiotic when they imposed it as when they eliminated it, because we're dealing with idiotic governments who have not been scientific whatsoever. But all that to say, there are people who are at this point afraid of their own freedom, but there are people who are over the top fed up, and more of them. And at this point, there's more and more people who now truly appreciate the degree to which state-funded media are just paid liars, government mouthpieces for the government, and they've seen it in real time. And if that's the one thing that I've contributed to this situation, that's enough.
Yeah, and which brings me to my next question too, a little bit about what you were saying before, but it has, because I mean, people now are watching state-run media, which is what it is now. Actually, like I mentioned before, they're trying to dig up the names of the people who supported these truckers, rather than go after the guy who obtained the full list and try to put. I mean, that's just nuts to me that. These are private, people. Obviously, they're from, everywhere that supported them, but they're doing the bidding of the government. They're not actually reporting the news, which again is what we would see in like fascist countries. We're not, it's this idea that Western media is somehow independent, and it's really no different than like left-wing tyrants that we see in North Korea. I mean, there's just no difference anymore. They have no adversarial relationship with the state at all.
I'll take it one step further. It's even worse than that. What they are in fact doing, CBC, and I've gotten emails of reporters emailing people saying, we'd like to interview you based on a donation made to the convoy in your name. I do plan on calling one of them back because I have a name and a number now, and I'll see what I do with that afterwards. But it's worse than that. What they're actually doing is encouraging this behavior. And they, for the left or for people, politicians and blue check marks that talk about dog whistles, what these media companies are doing is the most obvious dog whistle imaginable. They're sharing tweets with private information, and not just names and amounts. In some of the cases, postal codes, email addresses. They're sharing it. And Barnes and I have talked about the political permission slip concept on our live streams. This is the media contributing through barely hidden dog whistles to give the political permission slip for all sorts of reprisals against ideological adversaries in the name of the government, for and on behalf of the government, that subsidizes them and literally pays them. So it's over the top. I just hope people appreciate this, because what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and what you think you like now because it's targeted to your adversaries, one day, if you think you're not going to have your neck in that guillotine as well, you're deluding yourself. But it's over the top, and the media, they should just not be ashamed. It's incendiary, and it's incitement, if there's ever been it, coming from a state-funded media, which is supposed to be independent, but above and beyond that, it's supposed to be responsible and not contribute to the division and not contribute to the incitement and the doxing of private citizens.
It's incredibly reckless. And when somebody gets hurt, is anybody going to bear any responsibility for this? We were talking about before that some people still do want this. This is the question I got based on your experience walking around talking to everybody you did. This is in the U.S. unfortunately, the media hasn't done their actual job. What they have done is promote, fear porn. I mean, it's really what it is. And the people who are in our experience, and we have polling to back this up. Gallup's done it, Pew's done it, we've done it, Rasmussen's done it. So there's actual polling data to back this up. Those who are pro-lockdown are the most ignorant to the facts of this virus. I mean, it's really that's it. How likely are you to be hospitalized if you catch it and you're age this through this?
Some of them
They
said
are
50%.
Yeah, I mean, so the polling data bears this out. It's not anecdotal. Did you find that to generally be the case when you were talking to both sides on this issue? Who seemed to have an actual better grip? Because if you listen to the media, then I'm sorry, you have been misguided. And that's the way it is here in the U.S. Is that what you found on the ground? Just generally, speaking.
I said generally, there's exceptions on both sides. There are people on the
of course,
who would hear. I won't even say the words. Like antenna stuff, 5G stuff, turning on televisions when you walk by them, type stuff. Which fine, that exists on both sides. As a general rule, you could see the interviews that I did with the counter protesters. One of them, who's the most vocal about supporting the mandates, was unaware of the fact that the pharma companies have immunity for the Fauci juice. I'm gonna gross up your audience here. Unaware that there was immunity to the pharma companies. Other ones, saying I'm gonna weigh my words here, but certain side effects are what is the word? Minor side effects. Mild cases of things, suggesting that. Just repeating the same talking points, safe and effective. Some still seem to think that it prevents contracting, carrying, and transmitting the virus. So, my experience, the what do they call them? Counter protesters were on the large part more ignorant on very, very key elements, like determinate elements that would make someone reassess their situation. And by and large, on the other side, they might be more hyperbolic. They are talking about, crimes against humanity, jailing Trudeau. He's going to go to jail for this and that. That's the more hyperbolic side. But they're aware of the Charter of Rights. They're aware of the Nuremberg Code. They're aware of the immunity. They're aware of Fauci's history with pharma companies, with vaccines. They're aware of the World Economic Forum. They're aware of all of these international players who, on the other side, it's vaccines are good, vaccines are safe, vaccines are free. You should be compelled to take them because it's what you have to do to be part of a society. Unaware of fundamental facts, which are determinate. And if anyone had any doubt, you can go watch it was called The Interviewing the Counter Protesters about a week and a half ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the one, I watched that. And one of them compared it to a seatbelt.
No, compared it to
like
a seatbelt
law.
Another person said, well, when has any other protest lasted a week and crippled a city? And I was like, are you kidding me? Like maybe the BLM protests in Canada were not that over the top, but last year in my neighborhood in Montreal, there were protests for days, blocking traffic for the Indigenous protests. They toppled a statue of John A. Macdonald in downtown Montreal. Toppled, still hasn't been replaced. So to pretend that there have been no other disruptive protests is either willful blindness or delusion. To pretend that this protest is violent and destructive compared to previous protests, even in Canada, is willful blindness or ignorance. And, to pretend that this is somehow more disruptive, I believe is dishonest, because anybody who had gone to Ottawa to see this, not the other one in the Ambassador Bridge, which had some serious economic issues, but was resolved by way of court order. Anyone who has gone to Ottawa would understand the city itself has been under no crippling siege. Traffic is flowing smoothly. The only streets that are, bumper to bumper of convoy, Wellington, which is on Parliament Hill, it's not a main thoroughfare, and the neighboring streets. There was honking in the first few days. The truckers themselves stopped doing that even before the court order injunction, and respected the injunction when it was in order. To say that it was disruptive, destructive, and whatever, I've walked the streets. There was no graffiti, no broken windows. There was one broken window. I asked a cop, and he said, "Yeah, but it wasn't even the convoy that did it." So they're relying on the CBC and the blue checkmark liberal lying politicians, and even some conservative ones, saying that this is white supremacy. There were the flags, plural. There were Yahtzee flags, plural. Confederate flags, plural. Walking among the crowd. There were exactly 2 images of 2 flags from 2 individuals from 3 weeks ago, one of which was on the fringe part of the protest, who happened to have a photographer 3 feet from him to get the photo off perfectly.
Coincidentally.
And the other one was the only guy in the crowd wearing a full face mask, baklava, what is it called? Baklava? Like a full ski mask with sunglasses, carrying a freshly pressed brand new Confederate flag. So you can ask yourself some questions that the lapdog media of the government is not asking. But anybody who says it was violent, disruptive, maybe, violent, destructive, and hateful, they're liars, ignorant, willfully ignorant, or just living in the media bubble, which might make them a bit of both.
And yet, what do you make of this tactic by, I mean, for the people in the United States watching, I mean, we're no better here at this point, because I'm actually referring to this as the January 6th model. So it's the general idea: if you dissent from the government, you're disruptive to society, and you're a threat to our system of government. When our system of government is supposed to be founded on the ability to air your grievances and to protest and dissent, it just makes no sense to me.
Richard,
what do you make of this?
The government,
the
government against whom the people are protesting are saying, "Go home. We've heard you. Thank you very much." The people against whom the people are protesting are dictating the terms of the protest. I mean, that's great. When the government tells you to go home, we've heard you. Go home and we'll get back to, masking up your children, coercing people to get vaccinated against their will in order to keep their jobs, or coercing children to get vaccinated in order to have a normal childhood. Go home. We've heard you. We are telling you your protest is over. It's not exactly how it works. And the issue is, by the way, for anyone who's, accusing anyone of hypocrisy, the issue with the BLM protests was not the protests themselves. It was not the disruption itself. It was the violence and the destruction of property itself. Everybody it's a constitutional right to protest. And if protests aren't disruptive, they're not protests. Blocking traffic is a protest. BLM did it all the time. Blocking traffic, I don't think people had the problems with. It was all the other violence and destruction that went along with it. And this is not even blocking traffic. I've been there. I've showed it in real time. Fire trucks were actually blaring down the streets when they needed to. There was a lane open pretty much at all places. Sections of road were closed off and actually empty of any vehicles, so that the main thoroughfares, I think it's Booth Street in Ottawa, could remain open to the public. So there's some false analogies like, oh, protests have to be disruptive, but you complained about the BLM. Nobody complained about the BLM until it got destructive and violent.
Until it got violent and destructive, yeah.
Nobody said you couldn't go protest because of COVID. Whereas the exact opposite was done. You had Justin Trudeau kneeling at a BLM protest, while 2 provinces over, Maxime Bernier is getting arrested for having an outdoor political rally with 30 people, whereas Justin Trudeau and other politicians are preaching before thousands. I mean, the hypocrisy runs one way, politically speaking, but no one was saying BLM never had the right to peaceful assembly, even during COVID. It was only the other way around, and it's the exact other way around now.
Yeah, it really is hypocrisy in the highest order. And I think, though, people are seeing it, though. And I'm curious what, you ran for office. For those who don't know, you ran for a seat or a riding. We have seats, right? You have ridings over there, right? Parliament.
Yep.
You like tripled the vote of your party, almost nearly tripled the vote of your party, which was an incredible feat. And columns were being written by these very same hack media, trying to confront it. So I think they saw the handwriting on the wall, and if this was bad, what's next time going to be? The conservative voice there has lost the trust of his party. They're not really conservative in Canada and haven't been for many years. But we in the US now are seeing the blowback to this. What do you think politically could happen in Canada? How far could it go? Look at San Francisco, very liberal, extreme. They got their clocks clean last night in the election board's recall. Excuse me. All 3 of them went down. Viva, all 3 of them with 72, 75%.
I like to believe there's going to be political backlash because, look, I mean, even liberal MPs are angry with Justin Trudeau. I don't know what's going on with the NDP, the New Democratic Party, and that leader, Jagmeet Singh, whom I loathe as much as Justin Trudeau. These are 2 individuals who are hypocrites and liars, dividers like no one has ever been divisive before. I do like to think there's going to be a political tide turning. The only issue is, who's it going to be? Because previously, the Conservatives, were probably more liberal than the Liberals were liberal 10 years ago. And when you have the conservatives saying, okay, well, we believe in vaccine passports, carbon taxes, mandates, all this thing. You have a conservative party which is conservative in name only, and as liberal as the liberals. The only issue is, they haven't had the benefit of being in power to also be corrupt. So I like to think there's going to be some blowback just to attenuate the, I got 3 times as many votes. That may or may not have been because of me, because the PPC across the country, basically in every riding, they got basically more votes.
Yeah.
So it was a national thing. Maybe I contributed to that through a voice and through normalizing the PPC, because it had been demonized as an extreme party in 2018.
Yeah.
But so that rise was across the nation. And by all accounts, it's even more now. So next election, in addition to, I believe Maxime Bernier will now have a place at the leaders debate, because the party reached over 4.5% nationally. They got back half of their campaign finances because they reached that threshold. So next time around, when people can actually hear the party's message, in theory, I suspect more people will go for it. This time around, we had to fight an uphill battle against political censorship, media censorship, and corruption through and through, even down to the municipal levels, where they kept PPC candidates off the local debates, finding all sorts of creative reasons to do it. Just appreciate this, and everyone should appreciate this. Locally, like not just federally at the leaders debate among the federal leaders, locally in local ridings, in so many places, they had creative reasons to not invite the PPC candidate. On the one hand, they didn't reach the threshold required for the leaders debate. That was never a threshold anywhere for local debates. On the other hand, they don't have a seat in the federal parliament, despite polling at 6 to 10%. Another criteria that's absolute fabrication just to keep them off the table. So the corruption was like top to bottom, to the local municipalities, who all found a reason to keep the PPC candidates off of the public debate in large part. So next time around, it might be a different world, and people might be a little bit more sensitive to how quickly a democratic country like Canada can be turned into an absolute fascist totalitarian regime, where just overnight, he's going to respect our constitutional rights, and he's going to respect due process and all of the stuff, while simultaneously authorizing banks with immunity, without a court order, to seize, freeze, and cease doing business with political adversaries. I mean, but he's going to respect our constitutional rights, like a person who's punching you in the face and saying, "I'm not assaulting you right now, don't worry."
Yeah, it was across the board, and that's good that you brought that up, because people should understand you ran in a very liberal area. It's not surprising to see some gains in more conservative areas, because the Conservative Party was pro-censorship, pro-lockdown. So it's interesting to me what happened, because it really was so uniform. Do you think in your area you earned the votes of some of those people who are typical liberals and are wondering, how could these actions be construed as liberals? Like the Canadian version of a Tim Pool, or a Canadian version of a Glenn Greenwald. Like, these people generally still believe in what was considered liberal in the early 2000s, and now we're kind of like wondering, where do I have a place in this party?
I'll get to that in 1 second. I just want to, Laura, if you can bring up one chat. Orange Out says truckers can protest, they just can't continue to block international commerce. And by the way, we all agree on Laura. We agree on this.
That was quick.
She's on the ball. Orange Out, first of all, we agree on this. And when I did the interview with Ben Dichter, who's the spokesperson for the Freedom Convoy 2022, there are different entities that are protesting across the country. And he specifically said, our strategy is not to do blockades. We don't like it. It's a little too aggressive. And we're not doing that in Ottawa. Second thing, you can't continue to block international commerce. You can certainly do it to be disruptive at your own risk and peril, because it is technically, either a misdemeanor or, felony mischief, depending on your jurisdiction. But once that court order came down, the truckers moved. So it was disruptive. They went to court the way it works, and they were ordered to move, and they did. And the disruption lasted 3 to 6 days, depending on how you count it. So we agree on that. What's going on in Ottawa is not blocking any international commerce. It's not a siege. It's not a blockade. It is people parked their cars on Wellington. They were honking their horns for a bit, and now it's just turned into nothing but a festival of literal love and people feeling pride in their country. Now, just wanted to thank you just for that clarification, because we agree. Blockades, no one's going to say that they're legal and lawful. They're going to be a form of protest, and then the courts come in and say, get out, and you have an injunction, and they leave. Incidentally, not exactly what happened with the indigenous blockading of the railways last
Right.
year, where they
That's
got an
right.
injunction and the cops did not enforce it. So again, sucking and blowing politically speaking, but parentheses closed. I went door to door when I was running, and people loathed Justin Trudeau. They hated Justin Trudeau as much as many Democrats publicly and privately said they hate Hillary Clinton, but they're going to, quote, hold their nose and vote for her anyhow. Here, a lot of people said, okay, well, I'm not voting. I can't vote for Justin Trudeau. I hate him. So I'm going to vote NDP, which is more liberal than liberal. My response to that was Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are no better than Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. You have Jagmeet Singh, the guy saying, if you don't want to wear a mask and you oppose these mandates, you're a right-wing extremist, selfish. You don't care about your neighbors. You don't care about social policies. You should hear that sound clip. It's mind-numbing. And then after saying that, about a week later, he gets caught breaking his own COVID rules. No mask, hugging his buddy. So he's as much of a flipping hypocrite as Justin Trudeau. He just hasn't had the benefit of being in power. So, but people did say, I can't vote for Trudeau. I hate him. I loathe him. And my vote of protest is going to be to the NDP. And my response was, if you want to vote protest, then you vote the PPC, because you're voting NDP. Sure, you'll split the Liberal vote, but you're voting for something that is just as bad. But I got a lot of that sentiment. And I think I hope it's only gotten worse now, because Justin Trudeau, other than being an absolute loathsome human, and I'm saying this not to call him names, for your audience who may not know, who haven't watched my channel, Justin Trudeau has been found twice guilty of breaching ethics. He has had 2 confirmed ethics violations in his 7 years in office. One was for taking gifts from the Aga Khan philanthropist for tens of thousands of dollars of an all-inclusive vacation to the Aga Khan's private island resort, while the Aga Khan was petitioning the federal government and receiving $50-60 million in federal aid. He had an ethics violation confirmed by the ethics commissioner for that. That was number 1. Number 2, he was found to have breached his ethics when he fired the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, who he touted as being the first Indigenous woman appointed to the job. He appointed her. He took full virtue signaling credit for having appointed the first woman Indigenous Minister of Justice and Attorney General. When she decided that she was not going to settle the prosecution for corruption against a company called SNC Lavalin, when she said, I'm not entering a deferred prosecution agreement, I want to prosecute, Trudeau got involved, pressured her to not prosecute, but to settle. And she said, no, I'm doing it anyhow. Then he fired her. And he was found guilty of a second ethics breach for undue pressure on what is supposed to be an independent Minister of Justice. Third, he didn't get found in an ethics breach, which I don't understand for the life of me. His wife, mother, and brother were either on the gift roll or the payroll of a charity called the We Charity. His mother and brother had received hundreds of thousands of dollars in speaking fees over 2 years to speak at this We Charity fundraiser events. And then out of the blue, the We Charity was granted a sole-sourced, no-bid government contract to administer $1 billion in student aid, and they would have been remunerated like $20 million to do it. I don't know
Surprise!
how I'm baffled at how the commissioner, Mario Dion, did not find this to be an ethics breach. Somehow he concluded that the mother and the brother were not family under the law. I didn't understand the rationale. And then there's other things, forget the image. The image heard around the world, the accusations of having groped a reporter, among other things. This is the leader of the Liberal Party. Just let that sink in. This is now the guy lecturing others on racism, misogyny, intolerance. This is now the guy lecturing us on constitutional rights and what is needed to preserve democracy and preserve freedoms of Canadians. He's a hypocrite, he's a liar, and he's just a through and through awful person. And Liberals still vote for the Liberal Party because too many think they are liberal because they vote liberal, even if the leader of the Liberal Party is the most intolerant, hypocrite tyrant on earth.
And that's still the power that the media wields, though. So even like the liberals who didn't like him and would throw their vote away to an even further Liberal Party, it's, do they think any other vote is viable because of the coverage that the media has given? So that's still the minor, even though we see all of these polls, and that's true of the United States too, even though we see all of these polls that show that people are so distrusting of the media, they still have that ability because they have that infrastructure. So it's just that it takes time to chip away at these things. So,
Well,
over the years, you just have to keep hammering at it.
yes, there's that. I just also the problem is people are just too busy with everyday life.
They
They're
are,
too
oh
busy
yeah,
at being in distress.
rational ignorance.
Yeah,
Yep.
oh, and even in the best of times, they're just too busy. You got mortgage, you got kids, you got homework, you got dogs to walk, you've got promotions to go after, you've got budgets, people are just too busy in the ordinary run of things. Get them in a pandemic where they're literally in fear of their lives. They think their chances of being hospitalized if they contract COVID are 50%. But Richard, just to go back to like the importance of statistics. So I had a discussion with someone extremely smart, probably smarter than me, who was saying, well, 4.6% of hospitalizations or deaths were in the 40 to 50 age bracket. I may be wrong on the exact number, but give or take, of COVID deaths or hospitalizations. I forget which, but that's not the essential part. The person then concluded that my chances, if I got COVID, because I'm in the 40 to 50 of death or hospitalization, was 4.6%. And I said, you do realize how wrong that is, because 4.5 or 4.6% of the aggregate deaths might be 40 to 50 does not mean my chances of dying are 4.5%. And after a moment, it's like, yeah, okay, sorry, I made a mistake. It's like, but you made a mistake on something that is off by a factor of hundreds of thousands. You made that mistake. In your mind, it made sense. And that's how far gone critical thought is at this point in time, where you could be exponentially off. Like that's the difference between 1 in a million versus 1 in 10,000. And it made sense to you at the time. And now that you realize it was wrong, your underlying impression is never going to change, because that imprint of fear, that imprint of a first response, first reaction is always going to be there, despite the fact that you now know it was off by a factor of whatever. And that's the level of fear-induced irrational thought that too many people are going through right now, where they're just saying, just tell me what to do so I can feel safe. And I don't blame them. But I don't know how to get out of it. I mean, it's going to take time to get out of it, and then time to heal even once they've gotten out of it.
Yeah, the good news is a lot of the, historically, a lot of these fear-induced crisis, or fear-induced misnomers that come out of crisis, they do, wane over time. It doesn't become like the history of it when it's written, but at the time, it's so hard to break that. And like you said, this is an educated friend, right? Or you would say he's smart, right? Like he's
smarter than me, and has more years of experience than me, nonetheless. When it comes to when it comes to the healing of this, my grandmother was born in 1916 and died died in 2019. My grandmother lived to 103 years old. She lived through the Great Depression. She never got over her trauma from the Great Depression. Like, we would go to restaurants, she would still fold up the bread and put it in her purse. She would not want to waste any food whatsoever. She never got over that trauma herself. And I remember growing up, and it was always weird, just because we're not living, the reactions were weird. I got used to them and sort of got to appreciate them. But she lived 103 years, or I guess it would be 83 years after the Great Depression, and never got over certain reflexive imprints of fear and doom that come with having been so traumatized by an experience. So I think a generation is going to have scars from this.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, I was well taken care of, but when I stayed with my grandparents, but I totally recognize that. My grandmother, many things I recognize now, didn't at the time, but recognize it now that I got older. I could clearly see that was their experience through the Depression. And so, they would make more food than they needed and freeze it. I mean, just stuff that they would do that, maybe they didn't need something at a time, but it was on sale. So she would grab it and, keep it as long as it's an item that would keep, and just had coupon clipping galore. She just had these behaviors. We weren't at that point, but she, like your grandmother, she just never got over it. And also, there was a different mentality back then. You didn't.
Well, that's it.
You weren't so willing to take help.
Well, these are not bad habits. Preserving is not a bad habit. Even during COVID, when I thought we were going to have to be like looting in the streets for food, we were like, okay, well, we're boiling bones now. Don't throw out the chicken bones. We're going to make soup from it. We're going to get the gelatin stuff. So there is good. I say good trauma. There's good habits, and then there's bad trauma. But people fearing the security blanket of the face mask over their faces people fearing the security blanket of a vaccine passport, which, not a doctor, is absolutely useless, scientifically absolutely useless. When they lose that security blanket, they're going to have irrational fear and anxiety, and it's going to take some time to heal from.
You know, I don't know how much time you got, but you got a time to answer a couple
No.
of questions? They're
Yeah,
actually
absolutely.
good.
Go for it, please.
First, I'm jumping the line, and I'm going to ask mine first. Guys, I'll get to you, but I'm jumping the line. My son is like a food connoisseur, and he even loves to cook. He's 12 years old. And he saw the whole family watched your video with your family eating an ostrich egg. One is a two-part question. One, was it good? And then two, if so, where do I get an ostrich egg? Because since this kid saw it months ago, he's like, Dad, when you gonna ask this guy where he got this ostrich egg? Because he'll try anything. He'll try, and he wants to.
Taste-wise, it tastes exactly like an ordinary egg, just a little fluffier and a little creamier. So imagine you've whipped the egg a little harder and you've added a little cream. And so it other than being
The
an
way
exotic,
I like it.
no, it's
like
delicious.
it. Yeah.
The kids actually liked it better than regular eggs. Where you get them, this is a funny thing, Richard. When I originally put up the first video 6 years ago, it's got like 8 or 9 million views. I saw comments in the chat. You killed the baby ostrich. You're eating an endangered species. I was like, first of all, you need to learn how eggs work. They're not fertilized. They would never have become baby ostriches.
Never.
And at this farm, they don't sell the fertilized ones because they need them to produce an ostrich, which they also use for meat. Delicious. But where do you get it? In Montreal, there's a place called Nid d'Autruche, which means the ostrich nest in French. It's in Saint Eustache, 45 minutes away. They do ostrich farms, like petting zoo, tour guides, and it's amazing. They have like, I think, 1,500 ostriches on the farm, which they use for meat and tourist attractions, and they sell them. So I just put my name on a waiting list, and they know me there now because I sort of put them on the map with a bunch of those videos. But they sell ostrich meat as well, which is very interesting. It's like filet mignon type meat. It's red, it looks like regular beef, but no fat to it. So didn't kill any animals.
Very lean.
Didn't kill an endangered species or a baby. It's a farm, and they sell them to the public.
Yeah, for people who say that, you would have to know. I guess you would have to have experience with it and know that. And ironically, if I was still living in urban Jersey or New York, I would know where to get it. In New York, I would know where to get it. And in urban New Jersey, maybe 25 minutes away, there's an ostrich farm I know about that my dad knew, and he knows who ran it. So I would have been able to get it. Now here I am, and I have no idea where to get them. So that's neat. At least it tells me, though, a little bit better of a place to look. I bet you there is a specialty place.
And if you want to see something amazing, watch an ostrich. What is it called? Laying the egg. It's interesting.
I think I halfway know the answer to this question for you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done what you would have done. But it's a great question from Nathan. He asked, is there any hope that the Canadian Conservative Party can become actually conservative?
So I mean, I don't think along these lines in terms of conservative versus liberal politics in general. I don't consider myself conservative.
It's like fundamentals. Yeah.
Well, it's like if being conservative means being pro free speech and
that's a good
upholding the
point.
Constitution, fine. I guess I'm conservative, but I believe in gay marriage. I believe in a woman's right to choose within certain parameters of law. So I don't know where I fit. I believe in certain gun rights, but maybe some gun restrictions. Although seeing the way things have gone in Canada, I might be more pro gun rights than not at this point. So, I mean, I don't know where I fit on the spectrum, but the Conservative Party seems to have lost its integrity, and it needs a leader who has integrity. Maxime Bernier will never go back to the Conservative Party. And so as far as I'm concerned, as long as the PPC is there, even though I like some of the Conservative candidates who might be running, the party was not there when Canadians needed them. Yeah. And so I don't care. I won't say they're, I don't want to use like hyperbolic expressions, but I will not support the Conservative Party ever. As long as the PPC exists.
That's Nathan. I think what he meant, was really along the lines of the lockdowns, because that's a really good point. How do you define conservative? But when people say that in this day, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're really talking about just a party that looks out for fundamental rights when these times come. And like Viva just said, they weren't there.
They weren't there. And
they weren't there.
They betrayed their people. Jason Kenney, conservative out of, oh cripe, it's Alberta.
Alberta, yeah.
I mean, you have these guys locking up pastors because they've shut down churches. You're going to call yourself a upholder of the Constitution? I don't know. I don't know what that is. I wouldn't call that liberal either. I mean, I would not call it liberal to shut down churches and not allow people to practice their religion liberally. I mean, so I don't know. The division is the labels I don't care about, but there is no party that has thus far, except the PPC, said we're going to uphold liberty, the Constitution, and basic human rights. Even in the context of a pandemic, the Conservatives didn't do that, and they should suffer the consequences politically.
Yeah, I think this label issue is a worldwide problem now because we have identity crisis with these parties. You know, look at what the whether it's the Russia hoax or our own pandemic response. You have these people who still go on CNN, MSNBC, and they're supposed so-called conservatives, yet they had no problem with an obvious Fourth Amendment and FISA violations. They had no issue with that. They think January 6th protesters should basically be locked up forever. So I don't know how you use these words anymore. We certainly need a clarification or just different terminology in general. But
I'll just say upholder of individual rights, because
that's
a good way to put it. And it's not upholder to the point of selfishness, and despite the caricaturization by those who say, oh, you want granny to die. It's like, no, but I don't. You've gone from you want granny to die to we're going to place other people at undue risk.
That's right.
To protect granny, even though it's not doing it. So you're doing it wrong. But that's a.
Yeah, we couldn't from those fears, from the point of when people first started saying those things, at least in the beginning, Viva, we didn't have some information. So there, at least in the beginning, there was a potential that logic or that line of argument could be valid, but now we know it's not. And it still hasn't broken yet. Yep. So
and not only now that we know that it's not, and now we know that the people who are saying it's gone from you want granny to die to we're gonna put a demographic at undue risk for something that poses no risk to them, ostensibly for the purposes of protecting granny, even though it doesn't. So yeah,
a little flawed. There are two that are basically linked, so I'm gonna put them together. And this is from is that Byron? Yeah, Byron, and also one that I mean, it's just the characters are mushed together. So one said, can Parliament have a no confidence vote for Justin Trudeau? And then the other one's asking, what recourse do Canadians have? And I really think maybe we could just put those together. What do you think? I mean, obviously, you're much more familiar with the system than I am there.
Yeah, but even the no confidence, the mechanism, I'm not sure. I know they can do a vote of no confidence at any time if they meet a certain threshold as to whether or not there's a lack of confidence in the leader. And then I believe that triggers a new election, even though we just had one.
Yeah.
September, October, November, December, January, 6 months ago, which cost us $600 million. They can, I don't know, they can do a vote of no confidence at any time. Why they haven't done it leads me to believe they're just political cowards. There are a lot of Liberal MPs who are very angry with Trudeau. The Conservatives should do it just out of pure political opportunity, and the NDP should jump along for their own political opportunity. Like, devour the political carcass of the Liberal Party for everyone's benefit, trigger the no confidence, and I think it passes. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly how you trigger that and then how it would work. And as for
everybody wants to be responsible. Everybody wants to look like the responsible politician.
Well, they just we don't blame it on us when the case numbers surge. But meanwhile, in the last 2 years, let alone in the last 10 years, they've done nothing to actually strengthen our crippled healthcare system. But recourse, I don't hold your breath for any recourse. I mean, you could sue the government; they're going to claim immunity. No, the bottom line is we don't have recourse against elected officials, unless they act beyond the scope of their mandate. And then, good luck proving that, even when you can. And good. The courts haven't struck down any of these COVID measures, despite the fact that in my mind, they've been unconstitutional from the beginning and haven't even gone through a standard legislative process that would make them valid in the first place. The courts haven't struck those down. So you think they're going to order damages to a citizen against the government? I mean, it's a tripartite of government circle of vortex of everyone leaning on the other for support and everyone patting each other on the back for the other. You have the government appointing their medical experts, who then advise the government, who then acts on the advice of their self-appointed medical experts, and then who are appointed by the government are going to defy the expert advice of the politicians. I mean, it's
Yeah, the cabal, we call it here. The
It's
cabal.
I would
It's
call it the
really
whole
what it,
it's the trinity of I won't say the trinity of oppression, but it's not far off from there. The courts have upheld the quarantine hotels. The courts have upheld curfew. The courts have upheld face masks on children. Out of Quebec, and these are on the injunctive basis, not on the merits. So there's a different legal criteria, but nonetheless, they have not struck down any of these measures on an injunction, on the injunctive basis. A court in Quebec said the risk, however minimal, still exists. Therefore, the requirement that children wear face masks is justified. Another judge
which
said,
is forever. That argument means forever.
Yep.
There's no way around that.
Except unless you go on the merits, and then on the merits where you don't have to worry about the urgency criteria for an injunction, they say, yeah, finally, okay, the evidence is there and it wasn't justified, so struck down 2 years later, but damage is done. Curfew on an injunctive basis, a judge said it's not that much of a violation of your rights to be ordered to stay in your house between 8 or 10 and 5 in the morning. I mean, just imagine that. House arrest is not a sufficient violation. Even though the health expert himself, Horacio Arruda, at the time said that there's no scientific evidence to support the idea that a curfew is effective at combating a virus. Then you have the court.
Those are one of the curfews were one of the more ridiculous mitigation measures, as if like viruses go to bed at a certain time, or I mean, it's just ridiculous. An activity increases or decreases.
But
if you are imposing curfew because you're afraid of nightlife, then you have to impose curfew based on rush hour. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, that was the issue. Other than being unscientific, it was illogical, because then all you ended up doing was bottlenecking people the next day in grocery stores, as opposed to spreading out the opportunity. So unscientific, illogical, unconstitutional, yet imposed by the government and upheld by the courts on the injunction. Yeah.
Rate. So this is there is one. Okay. So have you been able to look into, and maybe this is something from your show with Barnes. Have you been able to look into whether that order to freeze funds without being served by the court is actually legitimate, or is it some sort of service required? Maybe this is something I'm like not in the loop with here, but does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, well, they had empowered the banks to freeze people's bank accounts, personal accounts, if they suspected illegal activity. It was a question of whether or not, I have not looked into it, whether or not one could be held in contempt of court ex facie for having knowledge of a court order and violating it despite not being duly served with that court order. I will double check that today.
And LEK, you're just going to have to stay tuned to his channel, because I know the answer to this one. He has not decided what to do with the information yet, with the people who are stalking those who are donating, right? That you mentioned that before.
Well, I got someone forwarded me an email of a CBC reporter, and I'd be interested in talking to him and seeing why he's doing it, what the intention is, where they got the information from, and whether or not they think it's appropriate. But let's see. I haven't called anybody yet.
Yeah, and for the second part of that question, I mean, because it's common courtesy. I mean, they don't do it to everyone else, but if you if you disagree with some of their tactics, then you can't do the same thing they do. So it's at least common courtesy to call them and ask them, why are you doing this? Do you think it's appropriate? Then you deliver that information in its proper context to the general public, if you so choose. You don't just out the name of the person like they do and then make these assumptions to destroy.
There are accounts publishing this leaked information with private information of private citizens. These are not like they're not public figures, and these Twitter handles are not getting suspended for violating Twitter's terms. Whereas on the flip side of the political spectrum, the CEO says, well, we'll take down videos if it has someone's face in it who didn't consent, a private citizen who didn't consent. So weaponized application of ambiguous rules is exactly how abuse takes place.
Isn't that radio show host who got that list? Isn't that the guy who was thrown off of air because he was completely homophobic and made gay comments? Are they one and the same?
I have read those. I have read reports that this individual, I don't even care to name his name, that the individual who published this on his blog and on his Twitter feed had been suspended for homophobic remarks on air. I have not been able to verify or vet that. I've just seen the same news on Twitter.
All right. Lastly, I don't want to keep you forever, but lastly, before I ask you about your shirt, this is like a sidebar thing. I'm gonna short answer sidebar you here. What made you do this, Viva? Why did you? I mean, you were a lawyer, then you became a YouTuber, then you ran for office. You're obviously driven by some obligation, but I guess civic obligation. But we all have our own reasons why we start doing this and subject ourselves to all that comes with it. But what's the motivation here?
Well, there's two
I
things.
guess.
First, it's been a very gradual evolution, and
It has for you.
if
Yeah.
2 years ago I would say would I go from where I was 2 years ago to where I am today overnight? The answer would be obviously no. So you get acclimated to the situations as they evolve. But what's driven me? First of all, I just wanted to understand things to begin with. Just wanted to understand what was going on in the world. And at first, I was not opinionated because more important than having an opinion is making sure you understand first. And then as I
Yeah.
understood, and then as people, want to know what I think, it just became a more natural, organic thing to express my own opinion after having explained it in what I think are more objective terms than others. But the running for office, that was something I did out of my own conscience, because if I do decide to leave this province or this country because of the direction it's headed in, I know that I would have felt like a coward for having done that before trying to make the change that I think the country needed. It's not. I said I was going to run for the country before I ran from the country, because I know that if I just upped and left, that's a very easy thing to do. It's easy to complain. I tried to make a difference, and my riding still went 53% to the Liberals. And at the end of the day, if this is what the majority of Canadians want, I'm not gonna bang my head against the wall, and I'm certainly not gonna fight with the will of the majority. If they want to live in a country where the government can seize your bank accounts, can lock you in your home, can tell you what to do with your own body, failing which you lose your job, what your children have to do with their own body to have normal lives. If that's what Canadians want, the majority of them, you can have it, and I will vote with my dollar and I'll vote with my feet. But before I could do that in good conscience, I had to run. I had to make my voice heard. And as relates to this, I don't like being lied to. It's my pet peeve on earth, and it's my fear in life, is lying to other people, being perceived of as a liar, and my pet peeve is being lied to. And when I'm sitting there watching the CBC report on what's going on in Ottawa, Nazi flags, Confederate flags, violence, desecration, defacing monuments, destruction of the Terry Fox monument, and then I go down there and find out that they're all a bunch of pathological liars banking on the ignorance and apathy of Canadians to mislead them.
Yep.
I got a little pissed off in a good way, and I just said, I'll keep going back and showing the world so that nobody has an excuse to believe the lies. And if they do, it's for one of two reasons. But those who want to know what is actually going on can see it with their own two eyes the same way I did. If bad things, if bad events occur while I'm there and I see a flag, I'm not going to change it. I'm not there to change reality. I'm just there to show it to people, because the media is not doing it. And that's what got me there. And now there's the legal side to this, and it'll evolve, and we'll see where we are in a month. We'll see where we are in 2 months. But it's been one heck of a wild ride, and people are just starved for truth, and they're starved for objectivity. And if I can provide either of those or both of those two things, that's the motivation. But I hate being lied to.
Sound familiar, Laura? I got it. I'm listening to you over here, and I think I part of that. Not part of it. I mean, I can identify with that. When you see it firsthand, and they're dishonest people, but when you see the lengths they'll go to mislead people and how badly those lies are, it's just it never almost never ceases to amaze me, and I don't think I'll ever get over it. I really don't think I'll ever get over it.
This was flabbergasting to me. Like my moments of flabbergast when Klein Smith falsified the document that was submitted to the FISA courts to get flabbergasted. The way the media was reporting on Michael Flynn's pleading guilty, flabbergasted. The conflict of interest of the judges in that case, flabbergasted. When I went down to Ottawa and saw the destruction, the defacement of the War Memorial and the Terry Fox Monument, the defacement, I don't even know if that's a word. The defacing consisted of putting a Canadian flag in his hand and a banner that said freedom on his chest. Flabbergasted. And I hope that I've at least opened the eyes of a few Canadians. I know that I have in my immediate milieu. Some are just too damn stubborn to admit that they were duped. And they go like, some people actually say to me, a 1 minute video of protesters shoveling, that doesn't prove anything. I was like, well, I got 4 hours if you want to watch it. I don't have 4 hours.
You want to watch them all?
You have too much time on your hands. Like that is a tautological form. That is tautological ignorance. 1 minute doesn't prove anything, and who's got 4 hours to actually learn something? Same people, by the way, who will binge watch Game of Thrones over the weekend don't have time to watch what's actually going on around them. So, but flabbergasted.
Amen, man.
And the viciousness with which they are continuing to portray this convoy of hardworking Canadians and the attendees of this protest. Black people, pregnant women, Indigenous people doing blessing dances in the park, truck drivers, Romanian immigrants, Kuwaiti. They're trying to portray them as white nationalists, anti-black, racist, transphobic. I interviewed a trans individual who was at the protest in support of the protest. I interviewed members of the gay community at the protest carrying the gay pride flag within the convoy. The founder of the convoy or the spokesperson is a Jewish guy. And yet the politicians and the media run with these lies, flabbergasting. So if nothing else, the information is out there for anybody with the slightest curiosity and intellectual honesty to want to find it.
Yeah, it really comes down to intellectual honesty, because there's some of those people that it doesn't matter. Okay, a minute, how about 4 hours? And then they change the subject. It just doesn't matter. They're stuck in their illusory truth and they can't get out of it. And it doesn't, education doesn't matter. We've been doing a lot of with this lately, especially when it comes to picking juries, because you got to watch out for some of these people. Someone's life is on the line, and no matter what they've been told, the defense attorney could hand them, an alternative story, which obviously is more compelling on a silver platter, and they will not change their mind because they can't. And it'll hurt their worldview, whatever it may be. And that's dangerous. It's like anti-age of reason.
It is. It's childness, stubbornness,
immaturity,
and it's Mark Twain's. It's easier to fool people than it is to convince them they've been fooled, because for them to admit they were fooled, they have to admit they're not quite as smart as they think they were, and for them to continue believing the lie, they can continue thinking they were smart. It really is. It has to do with ego, and it has to do with intellectual honesty, and it has to do with, I guess, they'll learn when the media comes and tries to defame or besmirch an entity that they're interested in, that they care about, then they'll learn fast. I say people learn from the mistakes of others, but they learn quicker from their own mistakes.
Yeah, I don't know how else to top Mark Twain, but that's perfect. I mean, so obviously it's not something we've suffered from in modern era. I guess I would argue, though, that it is getting worse, because it just seems like people were open to debate and open to different points of view. This closing off, is a newer thing, and I can even somebody had asked me about the year 2000. It just earlier this morning, and the Bush v. Gore campaign. It was like my first real experience, doing anything, watching the process, and just people were more willing to talk. And it's like, all right, maybe I'm wrong about the impact of tax cuts. Maybe I'm wrong about,
tribalism has taken over, but I'm still optimistic, but tribalism has taken over right now. But we'll see what happens in Ottawa. I just saw, by the way, for anybody, I can't get down today, but there's another guy. I just got a notification. ZOT is live in Ottawa. So they've started.
I was just going to ask you if you had to go because of a stream.
I got
a stream here.
No, I've got to go for I've got to go for other reasons, but I'm going to go back to Ottawa. I didn't get out there today for a number of reasons. Hopefully I can get there tomorrow. But
it's tough to do every day.
I know it's a 400-kilometer round trip drive, and I'll sooner drive 2 hours in both directions than sleep away from my family. But I got to read you this, because this is the notice that the police have been handing out. Oh,
go ahead.
Ottawa Police Service. Notice to demonstration participants. I got to take my glasses off. You must leave the area now. Anyone blocking streets or assisting others in the blocking streets are committing a criminal offense, and you may be arrested. You must immediately cease further unlawful activity, or you will face charges. If you are arrested, you may be released on bail depending on factors contained in the criminal code. The people of Ottawa are being denied the lawful use, enjoyment, and operation of their property. False. And you are causing businesses to close. False. It was the government. No, I don't like being seen without my glasses. It was the government that told the businesses to close down to avoid violence and destruction and intimidation, which never existed in the first place. So all false. And then let's just say, I'll go quickly here. It's mischief under the code. Charges and or convictions related to unlawful activity associated with the demonstrations may lead to denial in crossing the USA border. and then it goes into some more.
Wow.
It's pure intimidation. The Emergencies Act was declared the day before yesterday, but they have not even voted on and ratified the measures, the directives that they're going to invoke, which they have 7 days to do. But they're handing this out, pure intimidation. And I cannot advise anybody on the lawfulness of doing anything. So I'm walking on eggshells myself, because I'm consider myself to be more of a documentarian, even though I agree with the message, and until they made it unlawful, contributed. But everyone's walking on eggshells.
Incredible.
It's incredible.
And
Overnight. If you donate, to a fundraiser, you might be breaking the law. A fundraiser that it was compensating the drivers for having lost their jobs, that was supporting a message of not blockading the Ambassador Bridge, because this is a different convoy, ending the COVID mandates, criminalized. This is Justin Trudeau's Canada.
All from a government, like many others, that were the ones who, to cite forcing, the closure of businesses is real stones, because they're the ones who did this from the beginning over a virus that posed little to no risk toward the vast majority of citizens. It's really, I mean, the gall. It's just,
it's shocking.
It's just unbelievable. Well, thanks for coming on, Viva. Come back when you can. We'd love to have you back. You're doing great work out there, man. Keep it up. Be safe.
Thank you very much.
But keep it up.
Thank you.
Tell people where to follow you. Go and
VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com and YouTube Viva Frei, Rumble Viva Frei, Twitter the Viva Frei, Instagram, Facebook Viva Frei. But don't worry about that. And that's where you can find me. And I'll be back. I'll be live streaming. I'll be interviewing. And my brother out of Toronto might be. I think the Windsor Bridge crossing thing is over. We might be in Ottawa together over the weekend, so we'll see what happens.
Sounds good. Keep your eyes peeled for it, folks. We'll throw the links up, Viva, for the audience. And see you soon, man. Be safe.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
You too. All the best.
Bye-bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Check out the podcast if you haven't. Really incredible. It's more than just podcasts. Like you said, it's really more like he's documenting them as they go to offer a different point of view. And, Laura started watching them too. And she started watching them first, and she was like, you really just, you love doing, compare the coverage that you are seeing to what, because we have done this in the past, and compare the coverage to a rally, a convention, or they are so dishonest. I mean, I don't know if there should be or could be, but it's, in my mind, it's criminal how much they deceive people, because that deception leads to actual violence and to actual criminal acts. And, not that I want to, because I'm not open to censor. People just, the answer to this really is that people just have to realize how deceitful they are. And I know the vast majority of them do. But the fact of the matter is, there are still these people who are sad cases of illusory truth, and they'll never break out of it until they're forced to or have to. And that was not always the case. Tribalism is definitely a cause for that. I also think we have a major problem with academics breeding or manufacturing this kind of mindset, where they no longer teach critical thinking. They teach the herd, they teach the hive, which is really similar. I mean, that's herd because it could apply. They teach the hive mind. They don't teach, critical thinking. And I can't tell you how many people, if you're on the ground, if you're polling, if you're in it, how many people just can't believe they've been duped, just can't believe that it's really a deference to authority being played on here. Some people who would call themselves liberal, yet are like hugging the calf muscle of the state. Please don't leave me behind. And are kind of just being dragged behind in the fetal position. That's intellectually the image I see in my head when I think of it. No matter what, they can't let themselves come to that conclusion. And it's a big part of it is because if they do, it'll break their brain, because their whole worldview is surrounded by these trusts and by these beliefs that these are the ones who will tell me the truth. This group of people are looking out for my best interests. And it's sad. So it's invaluable to have people out there doing what he's doing. It's invaluable. because society, and only possible now, by the way. So one good thing I can say is thank the Lord that these tools are at the disposal of people like Viva and others who can't stand the lie. Thank God they're at our disposal now, because yes, the media was biased. Yes, the media has always, helped out their preferred candidate, their preferred party, but the level of dishonesty now is something different. I'm telling you, he said one of his, flabbergasted moments was the moment when he realized that the 302 and the email was altered. Klein-Smith altered the documents for the FISA court. Everyone knew, ladies and gentlemen, that the Russia hoax was bogus. At Fox News, even. Yet they covered the Washington Post's fake bombshells day after day. If you still believe in the Russia hoax, you should know this. You're the only one who does. The people who are feeding it to you, they don't. They know it's not true. And they laugh at you behind your back. So I don't know what else it would take to break your insane circle run, because that's what you're doing. You're running around like someone who's insane, just in a circle over and over and over again. And they just keep feeding you something to keep chasing after this ethereal thing that's not real. And they're laughing at you while they do it. And it's sad for those of us who know to watch it. Because whether we agree with you or not, we never want to see anybody, like we talk about like Plato, we never want to see anybody stuck in the allegory of the cave. Like you're in the cave, man. You're looking at the shadows. You don't understand what's creating those shadows. And it's and nobody who's a human being who has a love for humanity, whether we agree with you or not. I mean, nobody should want to see another human being stuck in that lie. And that's my piece on it. All right, it's 11:32. When I come back, though, I do want to. I guess we kind of blew through our normal hour. Our normal break, our pause. I just want to talk about the disparity in the generic ballot. I'm going to put up a new public polling project donation or contribution link soon. I'll cut it off. We didn't make the other one, but you know what? I'm just going to cut it off because we do have somebody who generously came forward and said, we understand it's tough times. I'll try to match. So we're good with this. So I'm going to put that up. I would like some new generic ballot numbers. That would be great. And also, I want to talk a little bit about this different universe, talking about the lie. I mean, it really is all connected. Like, even Viva brought up the polling. The lie is, unfortunately, supported and reaffirmed by my industry. And it's not okay.
You need to pull from
two different worlds. You know what? That's another thing I was going to say, and I forgot to say. Lord just said it. If you can't pull your own damn country, Axios and the rest of you, if you can't pull your own damn country, don't try to pull someone else's country. If you haven't figured out yet how to properly pull the most 15 important states in this country when it comes down to balance of the Senate and the Electoral College, then do yourself and the rest of us a favor and stay out of other people's countries. I can't even tell you as a pollster how much even people who are being honest could blow that. You don't understand this one, your own, then you damn sure don't understand someone else's. So please just stop making a fool of us all. All right. I'm going to take a 2-minute, 30-second break. We'll be right back, and we'll talk about that poll. All right. Wait. By the way, subscribe on Rumble if you haven't already. Check out that little thing right there, peoplespundit.locals.com. Sign up, become members. We're going to have a lot of really cool stuff going on this election season. And early voting is starting in Texas already. And we would very much like to bring you a lot of cool and original stuff this year that we have not had in prior years. All right. So, to be able to support that, become a supporter of the peoplespundit.locals.com community. And also subscribe, YouTube watchers. It's great. Give us a thumbs up. We'd appreciate it. And hit the subscribe button if you don't already. Hit the notification bell. That'll let you know when we're going to go live. But we are really imploring everyone to go over to Rumble, subscribe to Rumble. All right. And when you're there, give us that little applause. All right. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Don't go anywhere.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
We can get on a plane and take a one-way ride. Steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to spear for knives to give in to the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
All right, we're back. Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Follow along on Rumble at People's Pundit. That's the Rumble channel. Real difficult, I know. But definitely, once you're there, if you're watching already, if you are not a member of the People's Pundit.locals.com community, sign up, become a member first if you want to be, but definitely a supporter if you want to get early access to stuff like I'm about to show you right now. We did go over it in some detail, however, and I did put it up before, but we're going to go over it in much more detail. And I created a graphic because illustrations really are much more effective at showing you the swing that I'm trying to tell you. By the way, Rasmussen is a poll out today. I don't know if it's live yet. It's 1:40. It should be live by now. But if you'll look, we were just talking about mitigation measures. We were talking about the school defeat in San Francisco. Things like COVID masks for children and COVID masks for public, or to prevent COVID mask wearing, has a social bias attached to it. So the polls will never fully capture how opposed people are, even though our polling, I think, has done a much better job than most. You will see in Rasmussen's poll that it is only Democrats who even believe that mask wearing is effective. Independents do not, and neither do Republicans. Whether or not people think that the mask should be worn in schools, only because it's only where the numbers overall are only where they are because Democrats are so near universally accepting of this, whereas Republicans and independents do not want this stuff. And the more likely to vote for a candidate based on this, again, overall lopsided. And I still think they probably failed to capture a pretty significant social bias. How do I know? Pennsylvania, that's how I know. How do I know? New Jersey, that's how I know. Virginia, That's how I know. San Francisco. That's how I know. And the school boards all across the country. That's how I know. Democrats fleeing for their lives from COVID mitigation measures that 6 months ago you could have lost your social media account for speaking out against. The science has always been the science. The only thing that's changed, and everyone's stealing this term from me, I don't care though, has been the political science. The polling has changed. That's it. And they obviously know it, or else you wouldn't have somebody like Ted Lieu, the hack schmuck that he is, even abandoning these policies. So there's that. We have this generic ballot discrepancy going on. Trafalgar came out just a little bit ago. They have Republican plus 12, basically 52-40. You have Morning Consult, who is one of the worst pollsters of 2020, one of the most left-leaning pollsters out there. Their bias in the Midwest was 10 points. It was horrible. Their national bias is about 6 points. You have them coming out twice now in a row with a lead for Republicans. Last week, it was a Republican plus 1. Republicans, for the first time ever, inched ahead 1 point. Now it's Republican plus 2. You have this universe of pollsters who have consistently shown a lead for the Republican Party. And then you have the worst pollsters, either holding on to that lead for Democrats, like The Economist, sourced by YouGov's consumer data, having a Democrat plus 5 poll, their recent. The Economist is the worst election projection model on the internet. And that's really saying something, considering how bad the left's favorite model is at it. I mean, the truth is, the only accurate election projection model on the internet was the one I authored, I designed, and put up on the internet, which debuted in 2014. It crushed the competition. It was the only accurate model in 2016, only. And in 2018, it outperformed everybody else, even though we only mainly stuck to the Senate races and gubernatorial races. And in 2020, we didn't have one because I felt the development of the public polling project really deserved all of my dedication, but also I have a little bit more strict ethics. If you're doing a polling project yourself that widespread, we always had our own polling, but especially one that's funded solely by the public, you probably shouldn't also run an election model. So without our election model on the internet, there is no accurate election model. That's the truth of it. The most well-known ones are the least accurate. And the least accurate of all of them is The Economist. The fact of the matter is, we have not found a lead for Democrats this year. The last 2 polls have shown a bottoming out that I would have had to literally fudge the numbers to give Democrats even an even chance. We are not finding this huge crossover like we have not found a plus 12. Although pretty close, I think Republican plus 9, I think, was one of the biggest ones, which I lamented because I thought it was a big lead. We are not finding what some of these other ones with double-digit leads are finding, which is this enormous crossover from Democrats. Yes, it is true that Republicans are getting more Democratic votes than Democrats are getting Republican votes. That's true. And sometimes it's double. But when I say double the crossover, I mean 3% of Republicans are telling us they'll vote Democrat, where 6% of Democrats are telling us they'll vote Republican. Where it's coming from is a bleeding. For the Democratic Party is bleeding independents. And yes, there have been independents we know are registered Democrats telling us that they're independent. And in our polling, that will reflect as an independent. Because party affiliation is fluid. And when you see those exit polls, it's not going to be based on registration. It's going to be based on party. So when we try to, it's going to be based on affiliation. So when we try to project the electorate, we are trying to do it the same way, which everyone else should do. We are seeing independents self-identify as Republicans, but yet they will still come up as Republicans. You understand? We are not seeing 25% of the Democratic Party saying they're going to vote Republican. But nevertheless, there is this clear lead for Republicans among those of us who have actually polled elections correctly in the modern era. And there is this resistance among many to change. YouGov, I guess, will just never change. No matter how many times they get embarrassed, they will never change. The Economist, they will never change. And they are interpreting YouGov's data. Morning Consult, I strongly suggest, I have no reason to impugn their motives, but I strongly suggest they have a serious problem with their panel and they just don't care. They just don't have any desire to address it. If you have a sample that big and you're that wrong, you suck. You suck. Every group should be adequately represented and you should have no problem applying minor weights to figure out what's going on. There is no such thing as a D+6 electorate. And damn sure will not be in a first-term incumbent midterm, where their party president is deeply unpopular. More unpopular than Gerald Ford. More unpopular than Jimmy Carter. And damn sure more unpopular than Donald Trump. D+8, D+6 during midterms that favor them? Okay, sure. But not now, and not in a presidential election cycle. Not happening. Barack Obama got a D+5, ladies and gentlemen, against Mitt Romney. Again, Barack Obama. And that time is long gone. Democrats have erased a 700,000 voter registration advantage in Florida. It's gone. It's now pro-Republican. Their once overwhelming registration advantage in North Carolina, even though they lost it, continue to lose it. Unless, you're John McCain. Then you suck so bad you lose a state like that anyway. Continuously bleeding and moving to the right. Large states like Pennsylvania, continuously bleeding, moving to the right. In states where there aren't voter registration, and we have to infer, Wisconsin is now R+5 or 8. I don't have it in front of me. But just during the 2020 election, it was barely Republican, just a hair Republican. And by the way, in fact, that's what it turned out to be, R1. This concept, this idea, you have a poll like the Marquette poll, which was once the gold standard. And they haven't been in 4 election cycles. But once upon a time, they did peg it pretty good. They did because they leaned to the left and the state was more left-leaning back then. As the state shifts to the right, they suck. There is no D+ anything in Wisconsin anymore. And at this point, everyone has enough data at their fingertips, at their disposal, that the only reason why they would do this is because they, A, don't mind sucking, and B, are doing it on purpose. So we have 2 universes of pollsters right now. And by the way, shame on so-called aggregators who exclude others who are much more accurate, yet continuously put garbage in their averages, which is why now I just mock the hell out of them. You want to put up a graph showing, yep, it's official, Joe Biden's approval rating is worse than Donald Trump's at this time. You do something like that, you damn sure better be ready for me to quote tweet you and make an ass out of you. With something like, imagine if all of the polls in your average didn't suck. Maybe you'd be offering a better product to your readers. But because you're arbitrary and afraid, that's really what it comes down to. You don't do it. People like us have given them ample, invitation. We've invited them to the office. We've invited them, to hear out presentations about why newer era digital sourcing is better and more accurate. They just don't care. Nobody's ever taken us up on it. The one outlet that did and rummaged through all of our material and all of our track record ended up hiring us as their national pollster. And we gave them the second most accurate national poll in the country last year. Or 2 years. Right. We're now, it's not quite 2 years because November is obviously at the end of the year. And at this point, so many people who follow polls are getting much more savvy. And definitely the community at peoplespundit.locals.com is savvy. That the jig is up, man. The game is over. You're just making asses of yourself. And I'm not sure if you know that, but you are. And for the first time, the people are laughing at you, as opposed to the media laughing at the people. So, that's what you have to live with. Knock yourself out if you want to continue to do so. But I will continue to tell people when polls are not worth being trusted. They're not trustworthy. As a matter of fact, at the end of this month, in a little over a week, right, Laura? About 10 days or something? Giving a speech in front of Hillsdale on this topic. Is polling reliable anymore? That question started my career. It's going to be a good one. All right. Let's look this. I just want to show you, even though we went over the actual idea of this. Yeah, it's actually about 8 days from now. I just want to give you guys this. Locals, you've seen this already. Just bear with me. It's really important. We told you that Donald Trump was going to win a historic share of the Hispanic vote in states like Florida, Texas, and on and on and on. But there have been areas around the country where it has lagged. This pattern has lagged. In an area like California, that's likely because it's a much more liberal state. There are deeper social biases. But Democrats have effectively, as Politico put it, effectively orphaned these voters. Their outreach isn't really great anymore because their message isn't a message these people jive with. They don't believe in their platform. So no matter what they do moving forward, it appears they're going to have a much harder time. Yeah, momentum is on reality's side. Damn right, Snowman. And they're going to have a much harder time distorting that reality because people are, there are issues that are going on that affect everyone. And it's the curtain's down. So this is really important because this is one of those areas that did lag. In the recall in 2021 against Gavin Newsom, despite the advice from the only accurate pollster in that area in the country, they blew over $14 million pitching traditional Republican strongholds like Orange County and San Diego, where they have been slipping. Republicans have been slipping for years. And they ignored areas where there were opportunities. And in case you didn't see my tweet this morning, I was teeing it up. Democrats are simply better at looking at the electoral map and finding opportunities than are Republicans. Because the establishment in the Republican Party have a collective mental disorder. And it's something akin to like battered woman syndrome. They're defeatists who don't believe in possibility and being told to shut up and sit down by the media, shut up and sit down by the Democratic Party. They effectively just cower like little cowards in the fetal position, and they ignore opportunities. Like they ignored all of those seats that we went over after the 2020 election. They could have won even more seats in 2020, but they believed the lies by the media. They believed the lies that Viva and I were talking about. And they're afraid. And I told you that this shift was happening in these various states. And I told you ahead of the recall, the only reason it was really tight is because of Hispanics in Central California. And once whites that they spent $15 million trying to convince, once they went back to Newsom to no, they were sunk. Or I would say more specifically white women, because white men did not. And neither did Hispanic men, which I'm going to bring up now. I gave this poll out to the locals community. You guys know it. You have it. Some of you may have seen it online. All right. I've been polling this area since the recount, some on behalf of David Giglio's campaign, but the recount was separate from that, and it all showed the same thing. You look at this new district, 53% Hispanic. By the way, so was Texas 15, was 84% Hispanic. And Republicans nearly bumped Rodriguez off. But because the National Republican Party and the National Republican Congressional Committee did not believe they could win a district that was 84% Hispanic, they let Texas 15 flounder. It wasn't a target. And a little push, a little help, it would have went. Donald Trump carried this new Texas 15 district, while Republicans lost it. Barely, but still would have lost it. Donald Trump would have carried it by about 3 points. Keep that in mind. So, in this poll, the generic ballot is basically even. It's 45-43, Democrat plus 2, but basically even. And I'm going to tell you why once we go over the 2024 hypothetical rematch, and compare it to the 2020 vote. We asked people who they voted for. We looked at voter history. 53.6, or round up to 54, said they voted for Joe Biden. 40.1 said they voted for Donald Trump. In the end, we were pretty damn close, although we underestimated Donald Trump by just a hair. It was 54-44. And some people doing their math, because there's a little bit of argument over certain precincts in parts of counties. Maybe it was closer to 40 for Donald Trump, okay? But what we did with the shapefile gave us 54-44, all right? So Biden plus 10. Hispanic vote in 2020, 54.7% of Hispanics told us that they voted for Joe Biden. Only 36.6% in this district told us they voted for Donald Trump. The Mexican or ethnicity, which is the largest voting bloc of any Hispanic group in this majority Hispanic district, told us they voted slightly less in favor of Joe Biden, but slightly less in favor of Donald Trump, 54.3% to 35.1%. Now, the rematch, Donald Trump is currently leading Joe Biden 42-39. While Donald Trump has a commanding lead with white voters, it's not coming from white voters. 53.3% of the Hispanic vote overall chose Biden. 43.3% of the Hispanic vote overall chose Donald Trump. So Donald Trump went up, increased about 7 points, whereas Joe Biden decreased by about 11 points. Let's call it 10. All right, since 2020. So you have what is essentially a 17-point swing among Hispanics to Donald Trump. He won Cubans 66-35 roughly. They're now 72-29 in favor of Donald Trump. But the Mexican vote, again, is the largest vote out of any Hispanic group in this majority Hispanic district. And they are actually going for Donald Trump. 44.5 to 42.6. Why does this matter? Bump up back to the 2024 Hispanic vote, compare it to the generic ballot, and you will see that Republicans are actually trailing the Democrats while they're winning the white vote pretty decently, although ironically not as much as Donald Trump. While they're winning, but the margin's not as much. They're getting more of the white vote. Donald Trump's winning it like I think 43 to like 23. He's crushing him. But with the generic ballot, there were more decided people. So there was like 47-39 whites were going for the Republicans in this district. That's not a big enough margin. You have to win the Hispanic voters that like Donald Trump. So while a generic Republican, because they don't know who the Republican Party is, they don't know if the Republican Party is filled with this anti-Trump hatred. And they like Donald Trump now. The crassness never really bothered them. What was holding them back in this area of the country was what I said before. There was a lot of reach out, and it was non-existent among Republicans. A lot of Democratic reach out to Hispanic, not any among Republicans. Donald Trump did make a play for them, but it's hard to undo years of relationships. Plus, big social stigma. Voting behavior becomes a pattern, like behavioral. What's the word I'm looking for? Routine. Voting patterns become routine until somebody breaks that routine. Joe Biden himself broke it. He broke it. Democrats broke it. With their sharp move to the left culturally that Hispanics are not down with, and with the destruction of what is effectively the supply chain in the American economy. And this impacts these voters in this area probably disproportionately than it does. Like, everyone's having the problem at the grocery store. This hurts their jobs in this area. What is going on with the supply chain actually impacts them. They're not working as much. They're not earning as much. And when you factor in inflation, their wages were rising under Donald Trump, now are being buried by inflation increases. So whatever wage gains they may have thought they were going to see has been buried by inflationary problems in this country. So last I'm just going to say is, this move is real, has been real for a while. We all see it. We saw it in New Jersey. We saw it in even Virginia, even though a very small percent is Hispanic. We saw it, obviously, in states like Nevada and Arizona and Florida. We saw it. South Texas, we saw it. This one lagged a little. So this one tells us, if Republicans don't sabotage themselves, they have a lot of opportunities in areas they never thought they would have opportunities, including this district. In a district like this, or whiter, if it's Biden plus 12 or less, they're in deep trouble. Just over 12 was the average swing in Virginia. It was higher in New Jersey. Ed Sweeney would not have lost if it wasn't for Hispanic working men. A Republican, no-name Republican, who spent $90 on Dunkin' Donuts would never have been able to win if it wasn't for Hispanic men in that area. Cumberland, Salem, sure. Gloucestershire, no. And Laura knows what I'm talking about. We know the area well. There are just too many who now, by the way, are eligible to vote. Maybe their families brought them here in the 90s. They grew up with us. Now they're eligible to vote. And they do vote. In the beginning, they thought they had to vote Democrat. That was just what they were supposed to do, especially after the financial crisis, where a lot of them began to hate Bush and the Republican Party because Bush was associated with the Republican Party and their home being foreclosed on. Now that they believe it's the party of Trump, or could be the party of Trump, they're ready to move back. This, again, let me just show you. This isn't people, new voters coming into the system. This is people changing their minds. This is 7% saying, damn, I should have voted for Donald Trump. And another 10% saying, I definitely shouldn't have voted for Joe Biden. This is a 17-point swing among people who voted in 2020. It is an absolute nightmare scenario for Democrats. The only thing they have going for them is how stupid Republicans are. The one and only Republican campaign outreach, and I am a little biased, the one and only Republican campaign that has Hispanic outreach, and by that I mean Spanish-speaking outreach. They are doing everything in their power to destroy. They actually have openly, many of them just openly endorsed the Democrat, and the others, because they hate Trump so much and they definitely don't want a political outsider, the others are working to recruit spoilers and already got themselves one. This is a man who won 300 votes in this area because he ran for governor in the recall. This is a man who won 0.08% of the statewide vote. They know he's not going anywhere. The idea is, oh my God, there could be somebody like Donald Trump who's not accountable to us, making promises that he's actually going to get things done, and it's in a pro-Republican year, and our chosen guy who's trying to lie and say he's a moderate, just like Jim Costa did 15, 16 years ago, actually has a progressive opponent, and holy hell, this guy could win outright. The betrayal. Democrats don't have to deal with this kind of betrayal. They don't. Democratic voters don't have to deal with this kind of betrayal. Republicans are betrayed on the daily. On the daily, the Republican Party reminds the Republican base why they voted for Donald Trump in the first place, why they nominated him, why they got him elected, and why they stuck with him through thick and thin. Isn't this what the Republican Party claimed they wanted? Isn't it? After 2012, when they put forward their bogus fake autopsy, which was incorrect, by the way, and their math was incorrect. That's how pathetic these people are. They're, like I told you, they're like all collected. They have a collectively have a mental disorder that resembled battered women syndrome, yet they think they are smarter than they are. Their math wasn't even correct in the autopsy. Mitt Romney would add a win over 70+%, over 71% of the Hispanic vote to have won that election against Barack Obama. That was not his problem. But afterwards, we all heard this is the party they want to be. Of course, that was a total freaking lie. Donald Trump comes along, racks up the most Hispanic votes since Richard Nixon because George W. Bush did not win 44% of the Hispanic vote. The most generous assessments give him 40%, and I don't buy onto that. The exit polls, everyone knows, were grossly wrong, even when adjusted. They adjusted the Hispanic vote share up to try to account for how badly they polled the white working class in 2004. It's that simple. And with that, I'll leave that there. Because it's baffling. It doesn't make sense. They're arguing what they say. It's just not true. If Tim Scott really believed Donald Trump was going to brand the Republican Party as an anti-minority party for years to come, and it would be so damaging, wouldn't you think he would have changed his mind now that we have the data to show? Exit polls are one thing. Raw votes are another. We know the exit polls in 2020 underestimated Donald Trump's non-white vote. We know it because now we have votes, actual votes. We don't have to rely on garbage exit pollsters. Since Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan won in landslides. He did it basically on the back of white voters. The electorate was more white, far more white. When W. Bush, got within striking distance of Miami, basically the same margin as Trump, only Trump did a little bit better. Miami was much more white. Far more white. So Donald Trump performed at that margin with a much less white electorate than George W. Bush had. So anyway, it really exposes how full of crap these people really are. They never wanted to be the party that represented the working class of all demographic backgrounds. They're full of crap. They're embarrassed by them. There's no other explanation. No other explanation. And if Republicans who want that party, that diverse party, you're going to have to defeat these liars. There's no other way. Because these are professional losers, and there's just no future with them. They'll take you back at least 10 years. That's what it will probably be worse because there are less white voters even than 10 years ago. And it will be that much harder to convince these voters that Donald Trump threw a line to if you do turn back the clock now. They will not be that receptive. If you lose this fight and then try to go back to them 2, 4, 6 years from now to earn their vote, they're going to tell you to stick it up your go pound salt. They'll say you had your chance, you abandoned us, screw you. And that'll be it. Say goodbye, generation. I'm serious. Small window. All right. All right. So I will check out Black Pills. I'll check out that race in Maine's 1st Congressional District for you, and I will get back to you. If you're a Locals member, hit me up on Locals, and I can get back to you privately. Or if you're not, then come back to me on Friday for the Freewheeling Friday, because I'm not quite there yet. And in fact, Locals, I'm going to tell you about some candidate vetting that we've been doing. I don't want to do this on YouTube and everything else. It's just part of becoming Locals. But, you know, we want to get to the bottom of where people stand on stuff. And when somebody asks us a question like he just asked, I want to be able to give them the correct information, because you're not going to get it from the media. You're not going to get it from a campaign ad. You're not going to get it from a tweet. You're only going to get it from people like me who can go and talk to these people and then give you my personal assessment of it. Unfortunately, I've earned the reputation as someone who will tell the American public whether or not they're full of crap. And some people are just flat out running for me right now. Very disappointing. Very disappointing. Can't go with the People's Pundit. Don't talk to the People's Pundit. He'll ask you the hard questions, and then he will tell everyone what you said. Yeah, that's kind of the point. People's Pundit. People's. That's kind of the point. All right. With that, I'm going to go. I'm going to kick rocks. Come back on Friday. We'll have Don Smith on, of course. Freewheeling Friday, Q&A, much more to come. And then keep an eye out, of course, for Locals. If you're let me just give me my end pitch here. Follow me on Getter at People's Pundit. If you want to check out the merch, Accuracy Matters, super comfy, super cozy. And by the way, basically show you're in the know kind of thing. Everything we were just talking about. The link's in the description. What else? You can still follow me on Twitter, of course, at Peoples_Pundit, trying to migrate as many people over to Getter. If you don't have an account, sign up and get one. Follow me over there. Also, YouTube, give us a thumbs up. If you don't subscribe, go ahead and do so. Hit the notification bell, let you know when we're going to go live. But we'd very much appreciate everyone rolling on over to Rumble and signing up there, People's Pundit on Rumble. And, the pluses, whatnot. Really, when you get there and you're watching the videos, check right up there above the video to up and to your right, my left, and you'll see the Locals link. You can sign. It makes it very easy for you to sign up, become a member, become a supporter, peoplespundit.locals.com. And we'll have a lot to talk about over there. It's a revolution in data journalism for a reason. We made a big impact last year, and we're going to make a bigger one this year. So go ahead and sign up. Become a part of it. All right, with that, I'm out. I'm going to go ahead and play, as always, special thanks to the Bowen Band for the theme song, Band Habit. Sometimes forget to mention them. And always, a pleasure to play if anyone has any other music. We haven't done that in a while. Then shoot it on over. We'll listen to it, see if we can showcase it. All right, but great song by the Bowen Band. And really, thank you guys for letting us use it. All right, I'm out. Like trout on my fishing round. See me on Friday.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. make this stuff up. My chest beats, its restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Get on a plane and take a one-way ride. Steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to spear for a night. Just to give in to the need and leave it all behind.
'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Deuces.